The most surprising thing you've ever heard. One act of kindness changed her life forever. Lila Johnson, a 15-year-old girl with big dreams, but no home to call her own, sat shivering on the cold concrete sidewalk outside Millie's diner. Her stomach growled, and her thin jacket did little to fend off the biting wind. It had been days since her last proper meal. She adjusted the cardboard sign beside her. Hungry. Anything helps. That night, the streets were quieter than usual, the bustling sounds of the city dulled by the chill. As she sat, hugging her knees for warmth, she heard the distinct sound of polished shoes tapping against the pavement. Curiosity tugged at her, and she glanced up to see a tall man in a crisp, tailored suit. She gasped softly, recognizing him immediately. It was Elon Musk. What was someone like him doing here, in this part of town, at this hour? Lila couldn't help but stare as he walked past her, his eyes focused ahead, his expression distant. She knew his face well from news articles and viral videos. The man who built rockets, revolutionized cars, and dreamed of Mars was now just a few feet away. Before she could think, her voice escaped her lips. Mr. Musk. He stopped, turning to face her. His piercing eyes softened when he saw the young girl sitting on the ground. Yes? Lila scrambled to her feet, suddenly nervous. Sorry to bother you, but I just wanted to say thank you for all the stuff you do. You make me think anything's possible. Elon's eyebrows lifted slightly, caught off guard by her words. He approached her, his towering frame intimidating yet oddly warm. Thank you, he replied after a moment. What's your name? Lila, she answered, fidgeting with the frayed edges of her jacket. Well, Lila, it's cold out here. Have you eaten? Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Not really. It's fine, though. I'm used to it. Elon hesitated, glancing toward the diner. Come on, he said finally, gesturing for her to follow. Lila's eyes widened. You mean? Yes. Let's get you something warm to eat. She hesitated for just a second before following him inside. The bell above the door chimed, and heads turned as the billionaire and the young girl walked in together. Whispers began to spread like wildfire. What happened next would change Lila's life forever. Where are you watching from? Please share your opinion in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more incredible stories. Have you ever imagined how a single meal could rewrite someone's entire story? The warmth of Millie's diner hit Lila like a wave as she stepped inside, trailing behind Elon Musk. Her heart pounded, half from excitement and half from disbelief. The other diners, mostly middle-aged regulars nursing their coffee cups, gawked openly. Whispers darted through the room like little sparks of electricity. Is that? What's he doing here with her? Lila tried not to shrink under their gazes, focusing instead on the counter where Elon approached a startled waitress. He leaned slightly toward her and spoke in that calm, measured tone she had heard in interviews. Can we have a table for two, please? The waitress blinked, her mouth opening and closing for a second before nodding hurriedly. Of course, right this way, Mr. Musk. She led them to a corner booth, the kind where the seats were worn smooth from years of use. Lila slid into the seat across from Elon, her legs bouncing nervously under the table. What would you like to eat? He asked, handing her a menu. Her hands trembled as she took it. She hadn't touched a real menu in months. Her eyes darted over the options: pancakes, burgers, fries, milkshakes, and her mouth watered. I don't know, she admitted. I haven't. I've never. Elon's expression softened. Take your time. Get whatever you'd like. Lila nodded, staring at the menu like it was a treasure map. When the waitress returned, she ordered a burger and a milkshake, her voice barely above a whisper. As they waited for the food, Lila couldn't stop sneaking glances at Elon. Sitting across from one of the most famous men in the world felt surreal, like something out of a dream. But there was something about him that seemed ordinary. Not in a bad way, just human. Why are you doing this? She blurted out suddenly. Elon leaned back slightly, his fingers lacing together on the table. Because I can, he said simply. And because you reminded me of something important. What's that? He hesitated, his gaze shifting to the window where the city lights blurred against the dark night. That every person has potential, no matter where they're starting from. Lila frowned. You really believe that? Even someone like me? Especially someone like you, he replied firmly. Her burger arrived then, along with a tall milkshake topped with whipped cream. Lila stared at the food, almost afraid to touch it, before hunger won out. She took a bite, the flavors exploding in her mouth, and couldn't help but smile. Elon watched her for a moment before speaking again. Tell me, Lila, what's your story? She paused mid-bite, her smile fading. It's not a good one, she mumbled. Those are usually the most important ones to tell, he said. So, she told him, about how her mom had fallen sick and couldn't work, how the bills piled up until they lost their apartment, how her dad had walked out years ago, leaving them to fend for themselves, how she spent her days wandering the streets, begging for spare change, dreaming of a life that felt farther away with each passing day. Elon listened intently, not interrupting once. When she finished, her eyes were fixed on the table, her cheeks burning with shame. You've been through a lot, he said after a long pause. She shrugged. It is what it is. No, he said firmly. It's what it was. The question is, what do you want it to be? Lila blinked at him, confused. What do you mean? I mean, what's your dream? If you could do anything, be anything, what would it be? The question caught her off guard. She hadn't let herself dream in so long. It felt dangerous, like hoping for something that could never happen. But as she looked into Elon's eyes, she saw something she hadn't expected, genuine belief. I don't know, she admitted finally. Well, he said, a small smile tugging at his lips, maybe it's time to start thinking about it. The most surprising thing about dreams? They often start when you least expect them. Lila couldn't sleep that night. After her unexpected dinner with Elon Musk, her mind swirled with questions, doubts, and the tiniest glimmer of hope. His words echoed in her head. What's your dream? The truth was, she hadn't thought about dreams in a long time. Survival left no room for dreaming. Her world revolved around scrounging for food, staying warm, and avoiding the dangers of the streets. But now, lying on the thin blanket she called a bed in a sheltered alley, she couldn't stop wondering. What if? The next morning, the city buzzed with life as usual, but Lila's steps felt lighter. She found herself walking toward the diner again, unsure why. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the strange sense of safety she felt in that booth last night. As she approached, her heart skipped a beat. There, standing by the diner's entrance, was Elon Musk. He spotted her almost immediately and waved her over, a small smile softening his usually serious expression. Lila, he greeted her. I hoped I'd see you again. You did, she stammered, her cheeks flushing. He nodded. I was thinking about our conversation last night, about your situation, and I wanted to offer you something. Her stomach twisted with anticipation. What do you mean? Elon reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card. It's an address, he explained. A friend of mine runs a youth program. They provide shelter, education, and support for kids like you. It's not a quick fix, but it's a start. If you're willing, I can help you get there. Lila stared at the card as if it were a ticket to another world. Why would you do this for me? Because someone once gave me a chance when I needed it most, Elon said simply. And now, it's my turn to do the same. Her fingers trembled as she took the card. The address was in a part of town she had never been to, far from the cold, unforgiving streets she knew so well. But what if, her voice faltered, what if I'm not good enough? Elon's expression softened further. You don't have to be perfect, Lila. You just have to try. She swallowed hard, tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. No one had ever believed in her like this before. Okay, she whispered. I'll try. The address on the card led Lila to a bright, welcoming building surrounded by greenery, a stark contrast to the gray, lifeless streets she was used to. A kind-faced woman greeted her at the entrance, introducing herself as Maria, the program's director. Maria showed Lila around, explaining how the program worked. They provided housing, counseling, and education, helping teens get back on their feet and pursue their goals. Everyone here has a story, Maria said gently. And we believe every story deserves a second chapter. Lila felt a lump form in her throat. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope. Sometimes, the hardest part of starting over is convincing yourself that you deserve it. The first night at the youth program felt strange to Lila. The bed was softer than anything she'd slept on in years, and the clean sheets carried the faint smell of lavender. She lay there staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. This wasn't home, not yet. Morning came with the sound of chatter and the smell of freshly baked bread wafting from the kitchen. Lila hesitated before leaving her room, her hand resting on the doorknob. She wasn't used to being surrounded by people, especially not ones who seemed so at ease. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out. The main hall bustled with activity. Teens her age sat at long tables, laughing and chatting over breakfast. The sight made her chest tighten, part envy, part fear. Maria spotted her lingering near the doorway and walked over with a warm smile. "Good morning, Lila. Did you sleep well?" Lila nodded shyly. "Come on," Maria said, guiding her toward the table. "Let me introduce you to some of the others." Lila found herself seated between two other teens, a boy with bright red hair named Kyle and a girl with braided hair and glasses named Tasha. "So, you're new here?" Kyle asked, his voice light and friendly. "Yeah," Lila mumbled, keeping her eyes on her plate. "Don't worry," Tasha chimed in, her tone reassuring. "We've all been there. It's weird at first, but it gets better. This place, it's different. People actually care." Lila risked a glance at them. Their smiles weren't mocking or condescending. They were genuine. Kyle grinned. "Plus, we've got Maria. She's like everyone's second mom. You'll love her." "Maria seems nice," Lila admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Tasha nodded. "She is. And she's good at seeing what people need, even when they don't know it themselves." After breakfast, Maria gathered everyone in the common area for the daily meeting. She explained the schedule: classes in the morning, workshops in the afternoon, and free time in the evening. "You're all here because you deserve a chance," Maria said, her voice steady and kind. "No one here is perfect, and no one expects you to be. All we ask is that you try." The words resonated with Lila. She wasn't sure what she could offer, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe she had a place. In the afternoon, Lila attended her first workshop. It was a creative writing session led by a volunteer teacher. The assignment was simple: write about a moment that changed your life. Her pencil hovered over the blank page for what felt like forever. Then, slowly, she began to write. "The day I met him, I was just another face in a crowd. I didn't think anyone noticed me, but he did." The words came hesitantly at first, then flowed faster as she recounted her encounter with Elon Musk. Writing felt strange, almost like reliving the moment. But it also felt good, as if she were reclaiming a piece of herself. Have you ever realized that the smallest steps can lead to the biggest changes in your life? For the first time in years, Lila woke up with a sense of purpose. The youth program wasn't perfect. Her anxiety still gnawed at her, and the unfamiliar faces made her feel like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit, but something about the structure gave her a sliver of peace. That morning, Maria announced that the group would visit a nearby community center to volunteer. "It's part of giving back," she explained. "Even when we don't have much, there's always something we can offer." Lila felt a pang of unease. Volunteering meant interacting with strangers. Would they judge her the way people on the streets always had? At the community center, the teens were split into small groups. Lila was paired with Kyle and Tasha to help organize donations in the center's thrift store. "This'll be fun," Kyle said, nudging Lila with a playful grin. She managed a weak smile. The store was bustling with activity. Shoppers browsed through racks of clothes, and volunteers moved quickly to restock shelves and sort through new donations. Lila stuck close to Kyle and Tasha, folding clothes and stacking them on neatly labeled shelves. "You're doing great," Tasha said after a while, noticing Lila's hesitation. Lila shrugged. "I'm just folding shirts." "Hey, it's more than some people are doing," Kyle said, glancing at a man who had just tossed a shirt back onto a pile. For the first time that day, Lila laughed. A soft, hesitant sound, but real. While stacking shoes, Lila overheard a conversation nearby. Isn't that Elon Musk? A woman whispered, pointing toward the entrance. Lila's head snapped up. Sure enough, there he was, casually dressed in a hoodie and jeans, talking to Maria near the front desk. Her heart raced. What was he doing here? Before she could decide whether to approach him, Maria waved her over. Lila, Mr. Musk wanted to check in on you, Maria said with a warm smile. Elon turned to Lila, his expression kind but curious. Hi, Lila. How's it going? She shifted nervously, unsure what to say. It's good. I'm doing okay. That's great to hear, he said, his smile widening. I was in the area and thought I'd stop by. Maria tells me you've been settling in well. Lila nodded, her cheeks flushing. It's a lot to get used to, but I'm trying. That's all anyone can ask for, he said. For a moment, she hesitated, then blurted out, Why do you care so much? You didn't have to help me. Elon's expression turned thoughtful. Because I see potential in you, Lila, and because I believe everyone deserves a chance. His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. That evening, back at the program, Lila sat on her bed, staring at the card Elon had given her. She thought about his words, about the chance she'd been given, and about the life she wanted to build. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to dream, not just about surviving, but about thriving. What if the moment you feared most turned out to be the moment that changed your life? Lila couldn't stop thinking about her brief conversation with Elon Musk at the community center. His words lingered in her mind like an echo. I see potential in you. That night, she barely slept, her thoughts racing. What potential could he possibly see in her? She'd spent years on the streets, surviving day to day. She wasn't special, at least, not in any way she could see. When morning came, she made a quiet decision. If Elon Musk thought she had potential, she needed to figure out what he saw and how to use it. Maria noticed the change in Lila almost immediately. During breakfast, Lila asked about the program's computer lab. We use it for online classes and workshops, Maria said. Do you want to check it out? Lila nodded. Yeah, I think I might. Later that day, Maria escorted her to the lab. It was a modest room with a few computers and a large corkboard displaying success stories of former participants. Take your time, Maria said, leaving Lila to explore. Sitting at one of the computers, Lila hesitated. She didn't have much experience with technology. Most of what she knew came from watching others. But as she clicked through the system, she discovered a quiet determination to learn. She started with the basics, typing exercises, exploring the internet, and reading about career paths. Each small success, mastering a shortcut, completing a typing lesson, gave her a rush of pride. One evening, Kyle noticed Lila in the computer lab. Hey, what are you up to? He asked, leaning against the doorframe. Just learning, Lila said, minimizing her screen self-consciously. Kyle raised an eyebrow. Learning what? Stuff about technology, she admitted. It's interesting. Kyle's face lit up. No way. I love tech. Have you looked into coding? It's super cool. You can make websites, apps, all kinds of stuff. Lila shook her head. I wouldn't know where to start. Easy, Kyle said, pulling up a chair. There's a free program I use. I can show you. That night, with Kyle's help, Lila wrote her first line of code. It was a simple task, a line of HTML that displayed her name on the screen, but it filled her with a sense of accomplishment she hadn't felt in years. A week later, Maria handed Lila an envelope. This came for you, she said with a knowing smile. Lila opened it cautiously. Inside was a handwritten note from Elon Musk. Dear Lila, I hope this letter finds you well. I wanted to check in and see how you're doing. Maria mentioned your interest in learning new skills, and I wanted to encourage you to keep at it. I believe in your ability to create something meaningful with your life. If there's anything I can do to support you, don't hesitate to let me know. All the best. Elon. Lila stared at the letter, her hands trembling. It wasn't just his words. It was the fact that he'd taken the time to write to her personally. She folded the letter carefully and slipped it into her notebook, a spark of ambition igniting within her. Have you ever taken a chance that scared you but felt like it could change everything? Lila sat at the computer, staring at an open web page for a free coding bootcamp. Kyle had mentioned it during one of their late-night coding sessions, and now the idea of applying filled her with both excitement and fear. The boot camp promised to teach beginners everything they needed to know to start a career in tech. It sounded incredible, almost too good to be true. But as Lila read through the requirements, doubt crept in. How am I supposed to compete with people who've had years of education? She muttered. Kyle, seated at the next computer, overheard her. You don't need a fancy background, he said. They're looking for potential, not perfection. Besides, you've got Elon Musk backing you, remember? Lila shook her head, laughing nervously. He doesn't back me. He just believes in me, I guess. Same difference, Kyle said. Now stop doubting yourself and apply. Worst case, they say no, and you keep learning here. With Kyle's encouragement, Lila filled out the application. She wrote about her experiences, her newfound love of technology, and her determination to create a better life. When she hit the Submit button, she felt a mix of relief and terror. The wait for a response would be agonizing, but at least she'd taken the first step. Over the next few days, Lila threw herself into her coding lessons. The more she learned, the more confident she felt. Maria noticed the change in her. You seem different lately, Maria said one afternoon as they prepared dinner for the group. More focused. Lila smiled. I guess I've found something I'm passionate about. It feels good to have a goal. Maria nodded thoughtfully. Passion is a powerful thing, Lila. It can take you farther than you ever imagined. Lila appreciated Maria's support more than she could express. Having someone believe in her, even outside of Elon Musk, made all the difference. A week later, as Lila was working through a particularly tricky coding exercise, a notification popped up on her screen. Subject: Congratulations on your acceptance. Her breath caught, hands trembling. She clicked the email open and scanned the words. Dear Lila, we're thrilled to inform you that you've been accepted into our coding bootcamp. Your journey begins in 2 weeks, and we can't wait to see what you'll achieve. She read the email 3 times, barely believing it was real. Kyle, noticing her stunned expression, leaned over. What's up? Did you? I got in, she whispered, her voice breaking. I actually got in. Kyle hooped, drawing the attention of the other teens in the lab. Lila's going places, y'all. That night, Lila lay awake in her bunk, the reality of her acceptance sinking in. The boot camp was in another city, which meant leaving the youth program and the newfound safety she'd found there. Could she really do this? Could she leave behind everything she knew to chase a future she wasn't even sure she deserved? She pulled out Elon's letter, rereading the words that had given her strength before. I believe in your ability to create something meaningful with your life. The next morning, Lila found Maria and told her the news. I'm scared, she admitted. What if I fail? Maria placed a hand on her shoulder. You've already come so far, Lila. The only way you'll fail is if you don't try. Have you ever faced a moment where moving forward meant leaving something, or someone, behind? The youth program had become Lila's sanctuary, but as her departure date approached, she realized just how much it meant to her. The thought of saying goodbye to Maria, Kyle, and the others filled her with an ache she couldn't ignore. Maria insisted on throwing a farewell dinner. You're part of our family, Lila, she said, and families celebrate each other's victories. Lila wanted to argue. This wasn't a victory yet, just a possibility, but she let Maria take charge. The common room buzzed with energy as everyone pitched in to prepare the meal. Kyle manned the grill outside while Maria and Lila set the table. A mix of laughter and teasing filled the air, but underneath it was a current of sadness. When the food was ready, Maria raised a glass. To Lila, she said, her voice brimming with pride. You've come so far, and we're all rooting for you. Don't forget us when you're out there changing the world. Lila tried to hold back tears as everyone cheered and clinked their glasses. Speech, speech, Kyle shouted, earning a round of laughter. Lila stood, nervous but smiling. I don't know what to say, she began. When I came here, I didn't think I could do anything with my life. But you all showed me I was wrong. Thank you for believing in me. I promise I'll do my best to make you proud. Later that evening, after most of the group had drifted off to bed, Lila found Maria in the kitchen washing dishes. Maria, she said hesitantly, I don't think I'd be here if it weren't for you. Maria smiled, setting a plate on the drying rack. You had it in you all along, Lila. I just helped you see it. Lila hugged her tightly, tears spilling down her cheeks. I'll miss you so much. Maria held her close. And I'll miss you. But this isn't goodbye forever. You'll do amazing things, and I'll always be here if you need me. The morning of her departure arrived all too quickly. Lila stood at the bus station with a single suitcase and a heart full of conflicting emotions. Kyle appeared, panting from running, just as her bus pulled in. You didn't think I'd let you leave without saying goodbye, did you? He said, grinning. Thanks for coming, Lila said, trying to keep her voice steady. Kyle handed her a small notebook. For your ideas, he said, and for keeping in touch. She opened it and saw he'd scribbled his email address on the first page. Promise me you'll write, he added. I promise, Lila said, hugging him tightly.
As the bus pulled away, Lila watched the city she'd called home fade into the distance. Her chest tightened, but she refused to let fear overwhelm her. Instead, she opened her notebook and wrote 3 words on the first page: don't look back. What if everything you thought you knew about yourself was just the beginning of something much bigger? The bus ride was long, filled with stops in unfamiliar towns, each mile carrying Lila further from everything she had ever known. She tried to focus on the excitement bubbling inside her, but the uncertainty gnawed at her. What if she wasn't ready? What if this new life didn't live up to the dream? By the time she arrived at the new city, the late afternoon sun had started to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows over the streets. She stepped off the bus, her heart racing with anticipation. This was it, the start of everything she'd worked for, everything she'd dreamed about. Lila stood at the curb, taking in her surroundings. The city was bustling, but there was a quiet kind of energy to it, the kind that made her feel both tiny and infinite at the same time. She checked the address on her phone and made her way to the boot camp's headquarters. The next morning, Lila woke up in a small apartment she'd rented nearby. She'd spent the evening unpacking her few belongings, trying to make the space feel like her own. But now, as she got dressed for the first day of boot camp, the weight of the moment settled heavily on her shoulders. She took a deep breath, reminding herself of the promise she'd made to Maria, to Kyle, and to herself. Today was the day she would finally take control of her future. When Lila walked into the boot camp building, her eyes widened. It was sleek and modern, with large windows letting in the natural light. She was greeted by a cheerful receptionist, who handed her a welcome packet and directed her to the orientation room. As she walked through the door, Lila noticed the group of students already seated, chatting nervously, their faces a mix of excitement and fear. The instructor, a woman with short dark hair and a confident air about her, smiled when she saw Lila. Welcome, Lila. Glad you could join us. Have a seat, we're about to start. Lila nodded, feeling a strange mixture of relief and awe. This was real. She was here. The first few hours were a blur. The instructor, Rachel, gave an overview of what they would be learning in the coming weeks, covering everything from coding fundamentals to the ethical implications of AI. Lila was surprised by how much she already knew, thanks to the lessons she'd been working on with Kyle. But there were also moments of frustration, where the material seemed to be moving too fast. She could feel herself falling behind as other students seemed to pick things up quicker than she could. After the first lesson, Lila took a break outside, trying to clear her head. The sun was shining brightly, and the noise of the city felt overwhelming, like everything was happening at once. She sat on a bench, watching the people around her, wondering if she really belonged in this world. Just as doubt began to creep in, she felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to see a student from her class, a guy with curly hair and a friendly smile. "You okay?" he asked. Lila smiled back, nodding. "Just a little overwhelmed." "Don't worry about it," he said. "It's normal to feel like that." "I'm Nathan, by the way." "I'm Lila," she replied. "Nice to meet you." "You're not the only one struggling, trust me," Nathan said, sitting down next to her. "But if you need help with anything, let me know. We're all in this together." Lila felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. For the first time since arriving, she didn't feel quite so alone. That evening, after a long day of coding and learning new concepts, Lila sat at her small desk in the apartment, reviewing her notes. Her mind was spinning with all the new information she had to process, but she couldn't shake the feeling of excitement. This was exactly where she needed to be. Her phone buzzed, breaking her focus. It was a message from Maria. "How's it going?" Lila smiled and quickly typed a response. "It's harder than I thought, but I'm doing okay. I'm learning a lot, but I feel like there's so much more to catch up on." "You got this. You always have. Just keep going, one step at a time." Lila looked out the window, her heart swelling with the weight of Maria's words. This was the path she had chosen, and it wasn't going to be easy. But it would be worth it. Have you ever faced a moment when the hardest part wasn't the task ahead, but the battle inside you? The days passed in a blur of coding lessons, lectures, and late-night study sessions. Lila felt like she was treading water, sometimes barely staying afloat, but always moving forward. She found herself in constant motion, whether it was solving problems on her own, attending group discussions, or helping Nathan with debugging a line of code that was giving him trouble. But there were moments, fleeting as they were, when doubt crept in, whispering in the back of her mind. Was she really cut out for this? Would she ever be able to keep up with the fast pace of the boot camp? One particularly frustrating afternoon, after yet another failed attempt to write a script, Lila found herself staring at the screen in front of her, her hands frozen on the keyboard. A deep sense of defeat washed over her, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. It was the same feeling she had when she was begging for change on the streets, her dreams seeming too far away to reach. But just as she was about to shut her laptop and walk out, a familiar voice broke through the haze. "You know, everyone hits this wall at some point. You're not the only one." Lila looked up to see Nathan standing there, a cup of coffee in hand, a concerned expression on his face. "I'm not sure I can do this," Lila admitted quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan took a seat beside her, setting the coffee down and leaning back in his chair. "I get it. It feels like there's this huge gap between where you are and where you want to be, right? But you're already doing it. You're already here, learning and growing. And that's the hard part." Lila sighed, running her fingers through her hair. "It doesn't feel like enough." "It's more than enough," Nathan insisted. "Trust me, we're all struggling with something. It's about pushing through even when you feel like quitting." Lila looked at him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. Maybe, just maybe, she could keep going. The next day, during a group exercise on AI ethics, Lila found herself in a heated discussion with another student, Olivia. It started innocently enough, with a debate over the role of AI in decision-making processes. But soon, Olivia's arguments started to feel more personal, as if she were challenging Lila's very understanding of the technology they were studying. "You can't just let AI be the judge of what's right and wrong," Olivia said, her voice sharp. "It needs to be controlled. Otherwise, we're just handing over our lives to machines." Lila felt her heart race. She wanted to defend herself, to argue that AI could be a tool for good, something that could enhance human decision-making, not replace it. But she was struggling to find the right words. Rachel, the instructor, noticed the tension and stepped in. "All right, everyone. Let's pause for a moment. Lila, Olivia, would you both like to share your perspectives with the group?" Lila took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. She wasn't the most outspoken person, but she knew this was her chance to prove that she belonged here. "Look," Lila began, her voice steady but filled with passion. "AI isn't about replacing people. It's about enhancing the way we make decisions. It's a tool, a powerful one, but it's still up to us to use it responsibly." Olivia scoffed. "You're talking like it's all sunshine and rainbows. You can't trust AI to make ethical decisions." Lila met her gaze, feeling a spark of determination ignite within her. "I don't trust AI to make decisions for us. I trust it to give us the information we need to make better ones." It's about transparency and accountability, not giving up control. The room fell silent as the group digested Lila's words. Rachel nodded approvingly. Good point, Lila. It's not about blind trust. It's about balance. Lila exhaled, a weight lifting off her shoulders. She had stood her ground, and for the first time, she felt like she belonged in this space. Later that evening, Lila sat in her apartment, reflecting on the day. She had made it through one of her toughest challenges yet, not just with the material, but with herself. She had spoken up, not just for AI, but for her own place in the conversation. As she scrolled through her social media feed, a post caught her eye. It was a message from Elon Musk's team, thanking her for her support the day she had stood up for him in Poppy's cafe. Lila paused, reading it again. It had been a simple note, but the words stuck with her. Your integrity and willingness to stand up for what you believe in are exactly what we need in this industry. Keep pushing forward, Lila. She felt a rush of gratitude, a reminder of why she had come this far. She wasn't just learning to code. She was learning to believe in herself again. Have you ever faced a challenge that made you question everything? What did you do when it seemed like quitting was the only option? We want to hear your story. Drop a comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Lila's journey is just beginning, and the best is yet to come. That's it, sometimes one decision can change the course of your entire life, and you don't even realize it until you're in too deep. Lila woke up the next morning feeling strangely light, as if the weight of the past few weeks had finally started to lift. She stretched, looking out of her small apartment window at the bustling city below. It felt like a new day, a fresh start, one where she had a purpose, and more importantly, the courage to pursue it. She checked her phone, expecting the usual texts from Nathan or Rachel about assignments or group meetings. But today, there was something different, an email from Elon Musk's team. Good morning, Lila. We hope you're doing well. We'd like to invite you to an exclusive tech conference in Silicon Valley next month. You were selected as one of the rising stars in AI and technology. We believe your insights would be invaluable. Please let us know if you can attend. Lila's heart skipped a beat. She stared at the email for several moments, as if the words on the screen might disappear if she blinked. This was real, wasn't it? A chance to be in the same space as some of the brightest minds in technology. A chance to truly make her mark. She couldn't believe it. Just a few months ago, she had been a girl begging for change on the streets. Now she was being invited to a tech conference because of her ideas and beliefs about AI. She knew this was more than just an invitation, it was a pivotal moment in her life. The week leading up to the conference was a whirlwind. Lila spent every waking hour preparing, researching, reading, rehearsing her thoughts. Nathan and Rachel were there for her every step of the way, offering support and encouragement. It wasn't just about the conference anymore, it was about proving to herself that she had what it took to belong in this world. On the day of the conference, Lila stood in front of her mirror, adjusting the blazer she had borrowed from a friend. It was a far cry from the tattered clothes she had once worn on the streets, but it was enough to make her feel like she was ready for the next step. As she walked into the grand hall of the conference center, the enormity of the event hit her. The room was filled with some of the brightest minds in technology, their conversations buzzing around her as she took in the scene. She felt small, almost invisible, but she reminded herself that she had earned her place here. She found her seat and took a deep breath, preparing for her first panel discussion. Elon Musk was scheduled to speak later in the day, and Lila had been asked to join a panel about the ethical implications of AI, a topic she had come to care deeply about. The nerves hit her again, but this time she didn't shy away from them. They were a reminder that she was about to step into something big. Lila sat in the green room with the other panelists, each of them seasoned professionals with years of experience. They discussed the key points of the session, but Lila's mind kept returning to the questions she had. What role does responsibility play in AI development? How can we ensure that technology is used for the greater good? Finally, it was time. Lila walked onto the stage, her heart racing as she took her seat among the experts. The audience was filled with eager faces, their eyes on her as she prepared to speak. The moderator introduced the topic and the panelists, and the discussion began. Lila's nerves slowly settled as the conversation unfolded, and she realized that she was more than capable of holding her own. She spoke passionately about the need for transparency and ethical guidelines in AI development, offering insights that were met with nods of approval from the other panelists. But it was when Elon Musk took the floor that the conversation truly shifted. Elon had been listening intently, and when he spoke, his voice carried a weight that captivated the room. AI should not be a tool of unchecked power, he said, his gaze sweeping over the panel. It should be something that works for everyone, not just for those who can afford it. Lila's point about accountability is exactly what we need to focus on. Lila's heart swelled with pride. She had spoken up, and now, here was Elon Musk, the very person who had given her a chance, acknowledging her thoughts in front of an audience of tech leaders. The panel discussion was a success, and by the end of the day, Lila felt like a different person. She had gone from being an outsider to an active participant in the conversation about AI ethics. As she walked out of the conference hall, she couldn't help but smile. This was just the beginning. But as she was about to leave, she received a message that would change everything. Lila, the text began. It's Elon. We've been talking, and we'd like to offer you a position on our team at XAI. We think you have the potential to be a game changer in the industry. We're excited to see what you can do with us. Lila's hands shook as she read the message. The opportunity she had been dreaming of was now a reality. She wasn't just a student anymore, she was someone with the chance to truly make a difference. The next day, she packed up her things and headed for Silicon Valley, ready to take on the challenges that awaited her. Her journey had come full circle, from the streets to the cutting edge of technology. What would you do if you were offered a chance to change your life in an instant? Would you take it, or would you hesitate? You won't believe anything that could happen next, but just wait, everything is about to change. Lila sat in her new office at XAI, a small, sleek space overlooking the bustling streets of Silicon Valley. She had barely slept the night before, too excited by the overwhelming change in her life. The weight of the opportunity ahead of her was both humbling and exhilarating. She had gone from a girl struggling to make ends meet on the streets, to now working at one of the most innovative tech companies in the world. Her new role at XAI was something she hadn't imagined when she first spoke out in Poppy's cafe. But now that she was here, she realized just how much her voice, her ideas, and her perspective mattered. Elon had seen something in her, something that others hadn't, and she was determined to make the most of it. The first few days were a whirlwind. Lila was introduced to the team, a diverse group of tech experts, AI developers, and business strategists who all seemed to share a common goal: to create artificial intelligence that was ethical, transparent, and truly beneficial for society. Lila felt a little out of her depth at first. These people were geniuses, some with decades of experience, and here she was, a 15-year-old from the streets, trying to find her place. But Elon's belief in her was constant. On the second day of her new job, Elon invited Lila to sit in on a strategy meeting about their upcoming AI development project. As she walked into the room, she felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. She had always been passionate about AI, but now she was about to witness the real decisions, the big conversations that shaped the future of technology. The meeting began with a review of their latest prototype, an AI designed to help combat climate change by analyzing environmental data and suggesting solutions. The room was filled with heated discussions about the potential applications and ethical concerns of their project. Lila listened intently, her mind racing as she tried to process everything. Then Elon turned to her, his eyes focused on her as he asked, "Lila, you've been quiet. What do you think about this project? How do you feel about the ethical implications of AI in environmental policy?" Her heart raced as all eyes turned to her. She had never been in a room like this, never been asked to give her opinion in front of so many important people. But she had learned to trust her instincts. "I think it's important that we consider the long-term consequences," she said, her voice steady but filled with conviction. AI can do amazing things, but we have to make sure it's used to benefit everyone. We need to make sure that we're not just focusing on the technology itself, but on the people it's meant to help. What good is saving the planet if we forget about the people living on it? A few people nodded in agreement, and Lila saw Elon's eyes light up with approval. That's exactly what we need to hear, he said. This is why I brought you on, Lila. You remind us to keep our humanity at the core of everything we do. The rest of the meeting continued, but Lila felt like she had just won a major victory. It wasn't just about proving her worth to the team, it was about making a real difference in the world. Weeks passed, and Lila's confidence grew. She began contributing more to meetings, sharing her ideas with the team, and even collaborating on new projects. Elon's faith in her had given her the confidence to speak up, to challenge assumptions, and to propose ideas that were both innovative and grounded in ethics. One of the most exciting projects she was working on was a new AI system aimed at improving access to education in underserved communities. Lila had never forgotten where she came from, the streets, the hardships, the constant struggle. She knew what it felt like to be left behind, and she was determined to make sure no one else had to face the same obstacles she had. One afternoon, while brainstorming with a small team about the project, Lila had an idea that she couldn't shake. What if we created a platform where students could receive personalized education, no matter where they lived, she suggested. We could use AI to assess each student's strengths and weaknesses, and then create a customized learning plan for them. The team looked at her, considering the idea. Elon leaned forward, his eyes sharp. That's a great idea, Lila, he said, his voice full of enthusiasm. But what if we made it even bigger? What if we could connect students with mentors and experts from around the world, not just using AI, but also real people? Lila's eyes widened. You mean like a global network of tutors? Elon nodded. Exactly. We can use AI to match students with mentors who can guide them through their education. It's about creating a community of learners, not just an isolated system. The room was silent for a moment, and then everyone began talking at once. Lila's idea had sparked something new, something even bigger than she had imagined. The project quickly gained momentum, and soon, they were working on a prototype that could change the way education was delivered globally. As the weeks went on, Lila found herself spending more time with Elon. He became a mentor to her, not just in the world of AI, but in life. He understood the struggle of growing up in difficult circumstances, and he encouraged her to stay true to her roots while pursuing her dreams. One evening, after a long day of brainstorming, Elon invited Lila to join him for dinner at a local restaurant. It wasn't just about work, he wanted to hear about her life, her experiences, and what had shaped her. They sat over a meal, talking about everything from technology to their personal stories. I didn't grow up with much either, Elon said, his voice reflective. I was just a kid with big ideas, trying to make sense of a world that didn't always make sense to me. But that drive, that hunger to change things, it's what's gotten me this far. Lila looked at him, sensing a connection between them. I know what you mean, she said. Sometimes it feels like the world is too big, too overwhelming. But then you start making small changes, and those changes add up. Elon smiled. Exactly. And that's why I believe in you, Lila. You're already making those changes. The world needs more people like you. You won't believe what happens next, it's something no one saw coming, not even her. The following weeks at XAI passed in a blur for Lila. Each day seemed to bring a new challenge, a new opportunity, a new task that stretched her mind and forced her to think bigger than she ever had before. But in the back of her mind, she couldn't shake the feeling that something extraordinary was about to happen. Lila had become accustomed to her new life, but it still felt surreal. The young girl who had once begged for change on the streets of San Francisco was now sitting in meetings with some of the brightest minds in the world. Elon had been right about one thing, she was making a difference. But the most profound change was the one happening inside of her. She had begun to see herself not just as a survivor, but as a leader. One morning, as she was sipping her coffee in the small, minimalist office she'd been assigned, Elon came in unexpectedly, looking as composed as ever but with a noticeable intensity in his expression. He walked up to her desk and placed a folded piece of paper in front of her. "I need your help with something, Lila," he said, his voice low but urgent. "This project, it's going to change everything. And I want you to be a part of it, not just as a contributor, but as a partner." Lila blinked, confused. She had been working on the Education AI initiative for weeks now, and it had been going well, but this was something different. The tone of Elon's voice made her heart skip a beat. "A partner?" she asked, her mind racing. Elon sat down across from her, his expression serious. "I've been thinking a lot about the future, Lila. About the future of this company, and about the future of AI. We're on the cusp of something truly revolutionary. And I want you to help lead it. This could be your legacy." Lila's breath caught in her throat. "Lead it?" she repeated, the weight of the words settling in. "Yes," Elon said, his gaze unwavering. "I want you to join me in leading this new initiative. It's a startup within XAI, something that will focus on creating a more equitable world through technology. We need someone with your vision, someone who can connect the dots between ethics, technology, and real-world impact. You've already proven yourself. And I believe you have the heart to make it happen." Lila felt her mind spinning. It wasn't just the gravity of the offer, it was the realization that her life, her entire trajectory, had been completely changed by one random encounter in a cafe. "But I'm still so new to all of this," Lila protested, unsure if she could live up to Elon's expectations. "I'm just a kid from the streets. I've never been in charge of anything like this before." Elon smiled, his expression softening. "You don't have to be an expert at everything. What you have is something rare, real insight, empathy, and the ability to think beyond what's right in front of you. You've got a fresh perspective that the tech world needs. You can do this, Lila." Lila swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her chest. She had been given a chance, an incredible, once-in-a-lifetime chance. And yet, it felt like a weight she wasn't sure she could carry. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that she couldn't afford to let fear stop her. "I'll do it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Elon nodded approvingly. "Good. Because I believe in you." The days after her meeting with Elon were a blur of excitement and pressure. Lila spent her time brainstorming new ideas with her team, developing strategies for implementing AI in ways that could solve some of the world's most pressing issues. The project Elon had invited her to lead would focus on using technology to improve accessibility to resources like clean water, education, healthcare, and financial services in the world's most underserved areas. But with this newfound responsibility came new challenges. The deeper Lila got into the project, the more she realized how much there was to consider, how many lives were impacted by even the smallest decisions. Every step forward was complicated by ethical dilemmas, logistical issues, and competing interests. Despite all of this, Lila thrived. She felt more alive than ever before. She spent hours researching, meeting with experts, and developing ideas that had the potential to change the lives of millions. Elon was there to guide her, but he also gave her the freedom to make decisions, to trust her instincts, and to learn from her mistakes. One evening, as Lila stayed late at the office, Elon came by to check on her. The glow of her computer screen illuminated her face as she worked on the project proposal. "You've been at this for hours," Elon remarked, taking a seat across from her. "Are you sure you don't need a break?" Lila smiled faintly, running a hand through her hair. "I'm fine. I just want to make sure we get this right. There's so much at stake." Elon nodded in understanding. "I get it. But don't forget to take care of yourself. You can't pour from an empty cup." Lila paused, taking a deep breath. It had been a while since anyone had reminded her of that. She had been so consumed by her work, by the urgency of the project, that she had neglected to check in with herself. "I'll remember," she said quietly. "Thanks." As Elon left her office, Lila sat back in her chair, reflecting on how much her life had changed since that fateful night in the cafe. What had started as a chance encounter had now become a mission that was about to take on even greater importance. What would you do if you were given the chance to lead a world-changing project? Would you be ready to rise to the occasion? You've heard of people being thrust into life-changing situations, but Lila never imagined her new role would bring so much pressure, so fast. The weeks that followed Lila's acceptance of Elon's offer were filled with endless meetings, late nights, and pressure that she'd never anticipated. The weight of the world seemed to rest on her shoulders. As the leader of XAI's new humanitarian initiative, she was expected to make decisions that would impact not just the company, but entire communities across the globe. The stakes couldn't be higher. Lila had always been driven by a desire to do good, to help those who had nothing. But now, faced with the reality of leading a project with such vast implications, she felt herself drowning in the scope of it all. Every move she made felt scrutinized, every decision monumental. One afternoon, Lila found herself in yet another strategy meeting, this time with Elon and the rest of the senior leadership team. They were discussing the rollout of a new AI-driven platform designed to provide clean water to communities in Africa, a project that could save millions of lives. But the conversation had taken an unexpected turn. "We need to make sure we're prepared for the public scrutiny," one of the executives, Rachel, said, adjusting her glasses. "This isn't just about the tech. It's about perception. How we present it to the world will determine its success." Lila nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more at play here. The room was filled with professionals, each of them with years of experience, but none of them had the same perspective she did. None of them had grown up on the streets, fighting for survival. None of them knew the desperation she had felt, the hunger in her stomach, the need to make a difference at any cost. "We've got the technology, the resources," Elon said, looking directly at Lila. "But it's the story that will make this stand out. You need to be ready for the challenge, Lila. I believe you're the one who can make this work." The pressure was suffocating. Lila had never been a spokesperson for anything, let alone a massive global initiative. The eyes of the world would be on her, judging every decision, every word, every action. And worst of all, she was afraid she might fail. Back in her office that evening, Lila sat alone, staring at the proposal in front of her. The words blurred as she tried to focus, but her mind was elsewhere. She thought about her past, how she had fought so hard to get out of the streets, to escape the poverty that had defined her existence. And now, here she was, with the power to change the world. But the pressure was overwhelming. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Elon. "I know this is a lot, but remember why you're doing this. It's not just about tech. It's about changing lives. You've got this." Lila stared at the message, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. Elon believed in her. He had given her this opportunity, trusted her with something bigger than anything she had ever imagined. But she still wasn't sure she was ready. She had so many doubts, so many fears, that she wasn't sure how to overcome them. That night, Lila lay awake, staring at the ceiling of her small apartment. Her thoughts raced in every direction. Could she really do this? Could she lead a movement that would make a real difference in the world? The weight of the responsibility was like a constant pressure on her chest, and it seemed to get heavier with each passing day. The next day, things took a turn. Lila was sitting in a meeting with Elon and a few key members of the team, discussing the final plans for the water initiative when she got some unexpected news. "We've hit a snag," Rachel said, her tone grim. "The first prototype of the platform isn't performing as expected. The AI isn't filtering data accurately enough, and the rollout will be delayed by at least a few weeks." Lila felt a pang of frustration. This was exactly what she feared, being in charge of something that wasn't ready, and now she would have to answer for it. She could feel the eyes of the team on her, waiting for her response. They expected her to handle this, to come up with a solution, and they expected her to do it fast. Taking a deep breath, Lila stood up, her mind racing. "Okay," she said, her voice steady. "We need to focus on fixing this problem right away. Let's assemble a task force and prioritize fixing the algorithm. We can't afford another delay." Elon looked at her, nodding approvingly. "That's the spirit, Lila. But make sure we're not rushing this. We need to get it right." As the team dispersed to get to work, Lila sat back down, her heart still pounding. It wasn't just the technical issues that concerned her, it was the possibility of failure. What if they couldn't fix it? What if the whole initiative fell apart? What if people started questioning her ability to lead? She couldn't let those thoughts consume her. But it was hard not to. When you're faced with failure, it's easy to want to give up. But Lila is determined to make this work, no matter the cost. Can she overcome the pressure and lead her team to success? Have you ever found yourself on the edge of giving up, only to have someone unexpected step in and change everything? The following days were a whirlwind. Lila spent every waking hour in meetings, analyzing data, troubleshooting technical issues, and trying to stay on top of everything that was happening within the initiative. The pressure was suffocating, and despite her best efforts, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was drowning. But one afternoon, as Lila was going through the latest updates from the engineering team, she received an unexpected message. It was from an unknown number, but the name on the message made her heart skip a beat. "Lila, this is Sarah. I've been following your work, and I believe I can help. Let's talk." Sarah? Lila couldn't believe it. Sarah was a former tech lead who had worked alongside Elon at one of his other ventures. She had been a key player in some of the most successful AI projects the company had ever launched, but she had mysteriously left the company a year ago. Nobody really knew why, but there were whispers that Sarah had been frustrated with how the company was handling its direction, particularly with its focus on profit over purpose. Lila had admired Sarah's work from a distance. She was known for being a genius when it came to AI development and a staunch advocate for using technology to solve real-world problems. But she had never expected her to reach out, especially not now, when things were so uncertain. Curious, Lila immediately replied, setting up a video call for that afternoon. When Lila connected to the video call, she was surprised to see Sarah sitting in a cozy, well-lit room, a calm smile on her face. Sarah had always exuded a sense of quiet confidence, but now there was a kind of intensity in her eyes that made Lila wonder what had driven her to reach out. "Lila," Sarah said warmly, "I know things have been tough for you. I've been following your progress with the water initiative, and I've seen how much pressure you've been under. I wanted to offer my help. I've been working on a new algorithm that could make the AI platform more efficient. I think it could be the breakthrough you need." Lila blinked, taken aback. "You're serious?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You want to help me? Why?" Sarah leaned forward, her expression sincere. "Because I believe in what you're doing. I've seen what it's like to be in your shoes, to feel like you're carrying the weight of the world. I know how hard it is to push forward when everything feels like it's falling apart. But I also know that what you're trying to do has the potential to change everything. And I want to be part of that." Lila felt a lump form in her throat. This wasn't just about the technology anymore, it was about something deeper. The stakes were higher than she had ever imagined, but she wasn't alone. Not anymore. "I don't know how to thank you," Lila said, her voice trembling slightly. "But if you think you can help, then I'm all in. We need something like this." Sarah smiled. "Let's get to work." Over the next few weeks, Lila and Sarah worked together day and night, hashing out the details of the new algorithm. Sarah's expertise was exactly what Lila had been missing, a fresh perspective, a new approach. Sarah's deep understanding of AI was invaluable, and her passion for using technology to solve real-world problems resonated with Lila's vision. As they worked side by side, Lila began to feel a glimmer of hope. For the first time since taking on this role, she wasn't carrying the weight alone. Sarah's presence was a reminder that even in the most challenging situations, help could come from the most unexpected places. Finally, after what felt like endless revisions and iterations, they had a breakthrough. The algorithm was running smoothly. The platform was finally ready to go. Lila sat in the conference room with Elon, Sarah, and the rest of the team, the tension in the air palpable. It was time to present the new version of the Water Initiative platform to the board. This was the moment that could either make or break everything she had worked for. Elon stood beside her, giving her a reassuring nod as they prepared to demonstrate the new algorithm's capabilities. The room was silent as they initiated the system, the screens lighting up with real-time data showing the platform's progress in filtering and delivering clean water to remote communities. The results were nothing short of impressive. This, Elon said with a smile, is what we've been waiting for. This is the future. Lila's heart swelled with pride as she watched the system work. But it wasn't just about the technology anymore, it was about the people whose lives would be changed by it. She could see it now. The faces of children who would no longer have to walk miles for clean water, families who could finally access something as basic as this essential resource. Sometimes, the right person steps into your life just when you need them the most. Lila's journey hasn't been easy, but with Sarah's unexpected help, she's one step closer to making her vision a reality. Can Lila and Sarah's collaboration change the world? Leave a comment below with your thoughts on unexpected allies. What if the moment you've been waiting for arrives, but it's nothing like you expected? The days following the successful launch of the new Water Initiative were a blur. The team had barely finished celebrating their milestone before the demands of the next phase started rolling in. As soon as the platform was online, it became clear how much more work was needed to scale it globally. Lila was thankful for Sarah's continued support, but even with their combined efforts, the task ahead seemed daunting. Lila spent sleepless nights revisiting the algorithms, brainstorming new ways to streamline the process, and coordinating with international partners to bring the technology to areas most in need. It wasn't just about perfecting the system, it was about ensuring that it would reach the people who needed it most. But amid all the chaos, there was an undeniable shift in the atmosphere. The team that had once felt like a fractured group of individuals was now cohesive, united by a common cause. Elon, too, was more engaged than ever. His unwavering belief in the project had become a source of inspiration for everyone around him, including Lila. She often found herself at the center of the room, surrounded by engineers and strategists, her voice now carrying weight and confidence. But in the quiet moments, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was at a crossroads. Despite all the progress, Lila was unsure of what came next. What would happen when the Water Initiative was fully operational? Where would she go from here? She had always been driven by a deep desire to make a difference, but now that she was living it, she had to confront the reality that even her best efforts might not be enough. One afternoon, as Lila was sifting through emails, she received a message from Elon. The subject line simply read, "Let's talk." Her heart raced. Despite working closely with him for weeks, there were times when she still found herself nervous about his expectations. Lila clicked on the message, her eyes scanning the contents. "Lila, I'd like to discuss the next phase of the initiative. I've been impressed with the work you've done so far, and I believe you're ready for a larger role. I'd like to invite you to a meeting with some of the top leaders at the company. This could be a game changer for you. Are you available tomorrow at 10 a.m.? Her breath caught in her throat. A larger role? Was Elon offering her something bigger? The possibility both thrilled and terrified her. She quickly replied with an enthusiastic yes, but her mind was racing. What did this mean for her future? The next morning, Lila arrived early at the headquarters, trying to calm her nerves. She had worked hard to get here, but now that the opportunity was within reach, she was uncertain of what it would bring. Would this new role take her further from her mission to improve lives through technology? Or would it open doors she had never imagined? Lila stepped into the sleek, modern conference room where Elon and a few other key figures in the company were waiting. There was a palpable energy in the air, and Lila couldn't help but feel out of place for a moment. The room was filled with powerful people, executives, engineers, and strategists who had shaped the trajectory of Elon's ventures. Elon stood up as she entered, greeting her with a warm smile. "Lila, thank you for joining us," he said, gesturing to the empty chair beside him. "We've been looking at your work, and we're all incredibly impressed. You've shown leadership, creativity, and vision. But more importantly, you've shown a commitment to using technology to help people. That's why we think you're ready for the next step." Lila sat down, her heart pounding in her chest. She had worked hard to get to this point, but the reality of it was overwhelming. Elon continued speaking, outlining the new role. Lila would take on a leadership position within a global initiative designed to bring sustainable technologies to developing nations. It wasn't just about water anymore, this was about creating long-term solutions for the world's most pressing problems. The weight of the offer settled on her shoulders. This wasn't just a job, it was a chance to change the world. But Lila knew that with great power came even greater responsibility. Could she rise to the challenge? Was she ready to lead something of this magnitude? Lila spent the rest of the day reflecting on the offer. As the sun began to set, she sat on a bench in the park, staring at the horizon. The path ahead was daunting, but it was also filled with possibility. She had never been one to shy away from challenges. And now, it seemed, she was being given the opportunity of a lifetime. But was she prepared for the sacrifices? The late nights, the endless travel, the pressure to succeed? Could she balance the weight of her new role with the ideals that had brought her here in the first place? Her phone buzzed, breaking her thoughts. It was a message from Sarah. "How are you feeling about the new opportunity?" Lila smiled, knowing that Sarah had been there every step of the way, even if from a distance. She quickly typed back, excited but also terrified. "It feels like everything is changing." "That's because it is," Sarah replied. "But you're ready for it. You've already done more than most people ever will. Just trust yourself." Lila paused for a moment, taking in Sarah's words. Trust herself. She had always been driven by the desire to make a difference, but now, more than ever, she had to trust that she had the strength and vision to lead this new initiative to success. What would you do if the opportunity to change the world was suddenly within your grasp? Lila's journey is only just beginning, but with the weight of responsibility heavy on her shoulders, will she rise to the challenge? Have you ever had to make a decision so big, it could change everything? Lila spent the next few days in a whirlwind of activity, her mind buzzing with the implications of the new opportunity Elon had presented to her. Despite her initial excitement, the reality of the decision began to settle in. She was no longer just a part of a small team working on a project, she was now about to step into a leadership role that could shape the future of sustainable technologies on a global scale. The meetings with Elon and the rest of the leadership team were intense. They discussed strategies, timelines, and the long-term vision of the initiative. It wasn't just about water anymore, or even just technology. It was about creating an ecosystem where innovation could thrive and make a tangible impact on people's lives, especially in places where technology was still a luxury. Lila was struck by the magnitude of it all. Every decision she made now had the potential to affect millions of people. The pressure was immense, but so was the sense of purpose she felt. For the first time, she saw the full scope of her work, not just as a project, but as a movement that could truly change the world. But even with all the excitement, Lila couldn't ignore the doubts that lingered in the back of her mind. She had come from humble beginnings, growing up in a neighborhood where opportunity was scarce and dreams often seemed out of reach. Now, she was being asked to lead a global initiative, to be a part of something bigger than she had ever imagined. Could she handle it? Was she ready for the challenges that lay ahead? Just days after accepting the new role, Lila was faced with her first major challenge, a report detailing the progress of the water initiative. While the numbers were promising, there were a few troubling issues that needed immediate attention. Some regions were struggling to adapt to the technology, while others were experiencing logistical issues with distribution. Lila sat in a conference room with her team, the weight of the situation pressing down on her shoulders. She could feel the eyes of her colleagues on her, waiting for her to provide direction. She took a deep breath and began to speak, her voice steady but filled with determination. "We need to reevaluate our approach in these regions," she said, looking over the data on the screen. "If the technology isn't working as expected, then we need to adapt it to the specific needs of the community. It's not enough to have a solution, we need to make sure it's the right solution for the people who need it most." Her team nodded, taking notes. Lila could feel the weight of her new role settling into place. It was no longer just about her vision, it was about the vision of the entire team. She was the one who had to lead them, to make sure they stayed on track and continued to push forward. Elon's voice echoed in her mind, "Trust yourself. You're ready for this." But as the challenges grew, Lila couldn't help but wonder, was she really ready? One of the most important parts of the initiative was the partnerships with local governments and international organizations. They would be the ones to help implement the technology in remote areas, where resources were scarce, and the infrastructure was often inadequate. Lila traveled to a global summit where she was scheduled to meet with several key partners. It was a grand event, filled with influential figures from the worlds of business, government, and technology. Lila had prepared meticulously for the meeting, but as she stepped into the conference hall, the nerves started to creep in. She had always been someone who thrived in smaller settings, with a team she could trust. But here, in this room full of strangers, she felt exposed. Everyone was looking to her for answers. They wanted to know how this technology would change their countries, their people, their futures. Lila took a moment to compose herself before stepping up to the podium. As the room fell silent, she spoke, her voice carrying with a newfound confidence. "We're not here to sell you a product. We're here to offer a solution. A solution that will give you access to clean water, to sustainable energy, to the tools you need to empower your communities. But it's not just about the technology, it's about creating partnerships that are built on trust, transparency, and accountability. We need each other if this is going to succeed." The room was still for a moment, the weight of her words settling in. Then, one by one, the leaders began to nod, acknowledging the depth of the commitment Lila was offering. By the end of the meeting, Lila had secured several key partnerships, including one with an international NGO that would help fund the installation of the technology in the most underserved regions. It was a huge win, but it also made the responsibility she felt even heavier. As Lila boarded the plane back to headquarters, she gazed out the window, watching the clouds drift by. The past few weeks had been a blur of meetings, decisions, and challenges. It was everything she had worked for, but it was also far more than she had anticipated. She thought back to the moment when Elon had offered her the role. She had been uncertain, unsure of whether she was truly ready for such a huge responsibility. But as she reflected on the progress they had made, the partnerships they had forged, and the lives they had already begun to change, Lila realized that maybe she had been ready all along. Her journey had never been easy. She had faced setbacks, doubts, and obstacles that seemed insurmountable. But each time, she had pushed forward, relying on her instincts, her passion, and her belief in the power of technology to make a difference. Now, she was standing on the edge of something even bigger. This wasn't just a career, it was a mission. And Lila knew that no matter how difficult the road ahead might be, she was ready to take it. The road to leadership is never clear-cut. Sometimes, you have to face the doubts and challenges before you realize just how much you're capable of. Lila's journey has only just begun, but the impact she's already having is undeniable. What do you think will be her next challenge? You won't believe the risk she's about to take. Will it be worth it? Lila's days were getting longer, and the demands were only growing. The projects were expanding, partnerships were multiplying, and the eyes of the world were turning toward her and the work she was leading. Every decision she made now felt heavier. The weight of expectations, from Elon to her team to the communities depending on her initiative, was suffocating. But it was the new proposal that had her second-guessing herself. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Lila sat in her office, staring at the digital blueprint of a new, bold idea. The concept was revolutionary, a new sustainable energy system that could power entire villages using local resources, cutting down on both cost and environmental impact. But there was a catch: it required a huge investment, one that would stretch their resources thin. They had enough to launch the prototype, but if it failed, it would set them back years. It wasn't just about the technology. It was about trust in the future, trust in her vision, and trust in Elon's backing. Lila chewed her lip nervously as she reviewed the numbers. The project could revolutionize energy access for millions, but the risks were high. What if it failed? What if she was wrong? Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Elon, ready to discuss the energy proposal. I believe in this, but we need to be smart about it. Lila sighed. She didn't know whether she was ready for such a big leap, but she had no choice now. The pressure was mounting, and her commitment to the cause was undeniable. She sent him a quick reply, "Let's talk." When Lila entered the meeting room the next morning, Elon was already there, seated at the head of the table, his usual air of calm confidence surrounding him. He was an imposing figure, but Lila had learned to appreciate the clarity and vision that guided him. As she sat down across from him, she couldn't help but voice her concerns. "Elon, I'm not sure about this. The risk is so high. If this project doesn't succeed, we could lose everything we've worked for. And I'm not just talking about money, I'm talking about trust. The trust of the communities, of our partners, of the people who believe in what we're doing." Elon listened intently, his eyes fixed on her. "I understand your hesitation, Lila. But remember, we didn't get here by playing it safe. Innovation isn't about staying comfortable, it's about taking risks, making bold moves. Yes, there's a chance this could fail, but there's also a chance it could change everything. And when you're playing to change the world, sometimes you have to bet on the impossible." His words hit her like a jolt of electricity. Lila had seen him take risks before, but this was different. This was a gamble that could make or break everything they had worked for. "I believe in you," Elon continued. "I believe in your ability to make the right call. But it's your decision, Lila. This is your project now." The next day, as Lila walked through the corridors of the headquarters, she bumped into Mariah, one of the senior engineers who had been with the initiative since the beginning. Mariah had always been quiet, focused on the technical aspects, but Lila had come to trust her judgment over time. Mariah stopped and looked at Lila, as if she'd been waiting for the right moment to speak. "I know you're worried about the new proposal. And honestly, I am too. But if anyone can make it work, it's you. You've built this from the ground up. You've proven yourself. This project, this risk, it could be exactly what we need to push everything forward." Lila glanced at her, a little surprised by the support. "You really think that?" Mariah nodded. "I do. Look, we've faced tough challenges before, and you've handled them. Maybe this one's bigger, but that doesn't mean you should back down. The world's waiting for us to make that leap. If we wait for the perfect conditions, we'll never move forward." It was a perspective Lila hadn't fully considered. She'd always been cautious by nature, preferring to wait for the right moment. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to take that leap. A week later, the decision was made. Lila called for a meeting with the leadership team to present the proposal. She stood at the front of the room, feeling the weight of the moment. "This is it," she said, her voice steady but filled with determination. "This project isn't just about technology. It's about pushing the boundaries of what we can do. It's about creating something that could change the way entire communities live. But it's also a huge risk. We could fail. And if we do, we'll have to rebuild everything from scratch." She paused, letting the gravity of her words settle in the room. "But the thing is," Lila continued, "if we don't take this risk, we might never get the chance to make that kind of impact. We can't afford to sit on the sidelines and wait for the world to change on its own. We have to be the ones to change it." The room was silent for a moment, the tension palpable. Then, one by one, the team members nodded in agreement. Elon was the last to speak. I'm with you, Lila. Let's do it. Sometimes, the biggest risks lead to the most incredible rewards. But in a world where success and failure are two sides of the same coin, is it worth the gamble? What happens when your bold decision becomes a beacon of hope and a target? The decision was made, and there was no turning back. The excitement at the headquarters was palpable, and the entire team was buzzing with energy as they prepared for the launch of the new energy project. Lila's heart raced with anticipation, but beneath the exhilaration, she felt a creeping anxiety. This was bigger than any project she'd led before. The weight of it was enormous. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. The prototype for the sustainable energy system was moving faster than anyone had expected, with each test showing promising results. Yet, the closer they got to launch, the more Lila realized just how high the stakes were. If this succeeded, they could transform energy accessibility for millions, but if it failed, there was no telling how far they would fall. It started with a quiet email, one that Lila barely noticed at first. It was a standard update from one of the team's engineers about a minor issue with the system. But as Lila scrolled through the message, she felt a cold shiver run down her spine. The numbers didn't add up. The calculations were off. A slight discrepancy, but enough to throw everything into question. She immediately called a meeting with her engineering team. They were deep into the testing phase, and the news hit like a ton of bricks. "We're seeing irregularities in the output," one of the engineers explained. "The system's energy generation is lower than we expected. It's not enough to stop the project, but if we don't fix it soon, it could delay everything." Lila's mind raced. Could this be sabotage? Or was it just a technical glitch? She didn't have time to dwell on it. There was too much at stake. The team worked late into the night to isolate the issue, but no one could pinpoint exactly what was wrong. "Can we fix it?" Lila asked, her voice strained. "We're on it, but it's going to take time," the lead engineer replied. The next day, as Lila was reviewing the project's financials, there was a knock at her office door. Elon stepped in, his usual calm demeanor hiding the fact that even he seemed on edge. "How's it going?" he asked, taking a seat across from her. "It's complicated," Lila replied, letting out a frustrated sigh. "We've hit a snag with the system. There's a technical issue we haven't been able to solve yet. We're working around the clock to fix it, but if we don't get it right soon, it could delay everything." Elon leaned forward, his eyes intense. "What exactly is the problem?" Lila hesitated before explaining the technical details. She could see the gears turning in Elon's mind as he processed the information. "Sometimes things don't go as planned," he said, his voice steady. "The important part is how you respond. If you can fix it, this will be just another story of overcoming adversity." Lila nodded, grateful for his confidence. But deep down, she knew the stakes were higher than just a setback. A failure at this stage could ruin everything they'd worked for. As the days wore on, the pressure continued to build. The project was supposed to be the launchpad for Lila's career, but now it felt like a ticking time bomb. Every hour, every decision, felt like it could make or break everything. One afternoon, as Lila was walking through the testing facility, she overheard a conversation between two of the engineers. They were talking about the issue with the system, and one of them mentioned something that made Lila's blood run cold. "I heard someone's been leaking information about our project," one of the engineers said quietly. "There's no way we could have missed that much. It's almost like someone wanted this to fail." Lila's heart skipped a beat. A leak? Was someone sabotaging their work from the inside? She rushed back to her office, her mind racing. If there was someone in the company working against them, it could ruin everything. But who? And why? The next day, Lila confronted one of the senior engineers, Jason, who had been part of the original team working on the project. He had always been reliable, but now, something felt off. "Jason, I need to ask you something," Lila said, her voice steady but firm. "Have you been leaking information about the project?" Jason's face turned pale. What? No, of course not. Lila studied him carefully, her gaze unwavering. Then why are there rumors that someone's been talking to the press about the issues we've been having? He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding her eyes. I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't told anyone anything. But Lila could see the hesitation in his eyes. Something wasn't right. She knew she had to dig deeper, but she didn't have time to waste. The project's success depended on every member of the team working together. If there was a mole, they needed to find out before it was too late. Later that evening, just as Lila was about to leave the office, her phone buzzed. It was an anonymous email, the subject line reading, "Your project is doomed." With a sinking feeling, Lila opened the message. It was a single line of text, "You can't trust everyone on your team." The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. She knew she couldn't ignore this. Someone on her team was trying to sabotage everything. But who? When trust is shattered and the pressure to succeed is overwhelming, who can Lila turn to? With everything on the line, she faces betrayal, doubt, and a decision that could change the course of her career. What will happen next? Will the project survive, or will it crumble under the weight of sabotage? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for the next chapter. What would you do if you discovered your most trusted teammate was the one trying to bring you down? Lila sat in her office, the weight of the anonymous email hanging over her. Her mind raced through the possibilities. Who could it be? She had worked with her team for months, building a rapport with each person. But now, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was betraying them from the inside. The pressure was mounting, and with the clock ticking on their project, every second felt like an eternity. She couldn't afford to waste any time. The next morning, she called an emergency meeting with her core team, trying to remain composed despite the anxiety gnawing at her. As the members of the team filed into the conference room, Lila couldn't help but study their faces. They all looked nervous, but she couldn't tell if it was from the pressure of the project or something more. Elon had been encouraging, but even he couldn't predict the chaos that seemed to be unfolding behind the scenes. The weight of it all felt crushing. She cleared her throat, focusing on the task at hand. I'm sure you're all aware of the issues we've been facing with the project, she began, her voice steady but with an underlying edge. But I've also received troubling information that there may be a leak. Someone inside the team may be trying to sabotage this project. The room fell silent. Lila watched their reactions closely, but none of them showed signs of guilt. Some of them looked surprised, others uneasy, but there was one person who seemed completely unfazed. Jason, the senior engineer, sat back in his chair, his arms crossed. He met Lila's gaze without blinking, and for a moment, she felt a chill. Are you accusing someone? Jason's voice was low, his tone sharp. Or is this just a wild guess? Lila held his gaze. I'm not accusing anyone yet. But I need answers. She could feel the tension building, thickening the air between them. Everyone seemed to hold their breath, waiting for something to break. Lila, Jason continued, his tone calm but defensive, we're all under a lot of stress right now. But this project isn't falling apart because of leaks. It's just. Just what? Lila interrupted, her voice rising with frustration. If you're not the one sabotaging it, then help me find out who is. We can't afford to waste any more time. Jason's expression tightened, but he didn't respond. The silence hung heavy in the room as Lila's heart pounded in her chest. Could he be the one behind this? She had trusted him, respected his experience, but now, she wasn't so sure. After the meeting, Lila didn't feel any closer to finding answers. But something about Jason's behavior continued to eat at her. She decided to take matters into her own hands. That night, she stayed late, going through the project's server logs, hoping to find some trace of the leak. She combed through every file, every communication, until she came across something that made her blood run cold. A series of encrypted emails, sent from Jason's account, had been flagged. They contained technical information about the project, But what was most alarming was that the emails had been sent to an anonymous external account. Lila's stomach turned as she read through them, the familiar details of their project now laid bare for someone else to see. It was sabotage, plain and simple. Lila's hands shook as she quickly called Elon. She needed to tell him what she'd found, but the words caught in her throat as she dialed his number. Lila, what's going on? Elon's voice was calm, but she could sense the urgency in his tone. I found something, she said, her voice trembling. It's Jason. He's been leaking information about the project. There was a long pause on the other end. Are you sure? Elon asked, his voice low. I found the emails, she replied. They were sent to an external account. He's the one who's been sabotaging the project. Elon let out a slow breath. We need to handle this carefully. If we move too fast, we could destroy everything. But you're right, this is serious. What do you want to do? Lila paused, her mind spinning. She had to act, but she couldn't afford to make a mistake. I'll confront him. The next day, Lila called Jason into her office. She could feel her heart racing as she prepared for the confrontation. It wasn't something she ever wanted to do, question someone she had trusted, someone who had been with the project from the beginning, but there was no other choice. Jason walked into her office with his usual swagger, though there was a tightness in his posture that Lila couldn't ignore. He sat across from her, his arms folded, waiting for her to speak. I know what you've been doing, Lila said, her voice steady but sharp. You've been leaking information about the project. Jason's eyes flashed with surprise, but he quickly masked it with a smirk. I don't know what you're talking about. Lila pushed a printed copy of the email logs across the desk. I found them. You've been sending sensitive project information to an external account. You've been sabotaging the project, Jason. Jason's face went pale as he looked at the documents in front of him. He didn't deny it, but the silence stretched on, and Lila could see the guilt creeping into his expression. I didn't mean for it to go this far, he said, his voice trembling slightly. But you don't understand, Lila. I've been trying to warn you. You're playing with fire. This whole project is a disaster waiting to happen. Lila shook her head, disbelief and anger rising in her chest. You don't get to make that decision for me. You betrayed me, and you betrayed the whole team. This project isn't about you, it's about creating something that can change the world. Jason leaned back in his chair, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. Change the world? That's what you think this is? This is about power and control, Lila. And if you keep going down this road, you'll regret it. Lila stood up, her fists clenched at her sides. Get out of my office, Jason. You're done here. Jason didn't argue. He stood up and walked out, leaving Lila standing there, her heart pounding. The weight of what she had just done settled over her like a storm cloud. She had just cut ties with someone she had trusted, but it was the only way forward. With one betrayal exposed, the stakes of the project have never been higher. But will Lila's decision to confront the traitor destroy the team's trust, or will it strengthen their resolve? Can they recover from the sabotage, or is the project doomed? What will happen next? Have you ever made a decision that changed everything? A moment that altered your future forever? Lila sat alone in her office, staring at the closed door as if willing it to open. The confrontation with Jason had shaken her to the core, but she knew she had made the right choice. Still, doubts gnawed at her. Was she too harsh? Had she acted too quickly? The project had been her vision, her passion, and she wasn't going to let anyone, no matter how close, undermine it. But with Jason gone, the team was fractured. The trust that had taken months to build was now in jeopardy. Lila knew the road ahead would be rocky, but there was no turning back now. Elon had called her earlier that day, offering his support. His calm demeanor had reassured her, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. She had exposed Jason's betrayal, but how would the rest of the team react? Would they understand her decision, or would they turn on her too? Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. "Come in," she called, straightening in her chair. The door opened slowly, and in walked Marcus, the lead developer. He had been one of Jason's closest allies, and Lila couldn't help but feel a sense of unease as he stepped into the room. "I wanted to talk to you," Marcus said, his tone serious, but not unfriendly. "About what happened with Jason?" Lila nodded, gesturing for him to take a seat. "I'm listening." Marcus hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Look, I know Jason did some messed up things, but I'm not sure this is the best way to handle it. The team's already on edge, and now we've got a real problem. We need to move forward, not backtrack." Lila leaned forward, her elbows on the desk. "I'm not backtracking, Marcus. Jason crossed a line. I'm not going to sit back and let someone sabotage what we've worked so hard for." Marcus looked down at his hands, his fingers tapping nervously. "I get that, Lila. I do. But you're alienating people, and that could hurt us in the long run. People don't take kindly to being put in a position where they have to pick sides. You've got to trust us if you want us to trust you." Lila's stomach tightened. Was Marcus questioning her leadership? Was he testing her resolve? She had always known the project would face challenges, but she hadn't anticipated this level of resistance. "I'm not asking anyone to pick sides," Lila replied, her voice steady but tinged with frustration. "I'm asking for loyalty, for integrity. If you can't give me that, then maybe this project isn't the right place for you." Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I'm not saying I'm disloyal. I'm saying we all need to be on the same page, especially after something like this. We need to figure out a way to move forward together, not tear ourselves apart." Lila watched him leave, her mind reeling. He was right about one thing: the project was at a crossroads. But the question was, who could she trust now? The next morning, as Lila was preparing for the team's next meeting, she received an unexpected call from Elon. His voice, as usual, was calm and reassuring, but there was a note of urgency that caught her attention. "Lila, I've been thinking about your situation, and I want to help," Elon said. "I've had a team working on something that might give you the edge you need, some resources, some technology that could turn things around. But I need to know if you're serious about moving forward. This is going to require a commitment from you." Lila's heart raced. This was the lifeline she had been hoping for, but it came with a price. "What do you mean?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I mean," Elon continued, "I have access to some cutting-edge tech that could give your project the boost it needs. But it's not just about the tech. It's about the people who can make it happen. If you're ready to take this to the next level, I'll help you, but you need to commit to going all in. No more second-guessing, no more hesitation." Lila felt a surge of determination. This was it. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for. "I'm ready," she said, her voice firm. "Let's do this." Over the next few days, things started to shift. Elon's team provided the technology and resources they needed to push the project forward. New engineers joined the team, some from Elon's own companies, and they brought a level of expertise that Lila had never imagined. But even with the influx of resources, there was still the matter of the fractured team. Lila knew she couldn't do this alone. She had to regain their trust, but it would take time. At the next team meeting, Lila addressed the group with newfound confidence. "I know the past few days have been tough. We've had our differences, and there have been mistakes made. But I'm here to tell you that I'm committed to making this work. I brought in some help, new technology, new people, and I believe we can turn this around. But I need you to be with me. Are you ready to move forward?" There was a moment of silence before Marcus stood up. "We're in this together, Lila. Let's get this done." The rest of the team nodded, and for the first time in days, Lila felt a sense of unity. They were far from where they had started, but they were moving forward. And that was all that mattered. What would you do if you were faced with the biggest challenge of your career? Would you back down or rise to the occasion? The following weeks passed in a blur of meetings, technical tests, and deadlines. Lila had thrown herself into the project, working tirelessly with the new team, but the weight of the decisions she had made, both personal and professional, remained heavy on her shoulders. She knew she couldn't afford any missteps now. Not after everything that had happened. As Lila sat at her desk one morning, reviewing the latest progress reports, her phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was from Elon. Lila, Elon's voice came through the speaker, warm yet serious. We've encountered an issue that could affect your project. We've been analyzing the data, and there's a flaw in the technology we provided. If it isn't fixed soon, it could delay your timeline. Lila's stomach dropped. After everything they had worked for, this was the last thing they needed. The last thing she needed. What kind of flaw? She asked, her voice tight with concern. Elon sighed. It's a compatibility issue with the core system you're using. It's fixable, but it'll take some time. And given how much pressure you're under, I wanted to let you know right away so we can manage expectations. Lila pinched the bridge of her nose, feeling a headache coming on. She had expected challenges, but this was beyond what she had anticipated. How long are we talking about? At least another 2 weeks, Elon replied. But I'll have my best people on it. We'll get you back on track, Lila. Lila closed her eyes for a moment. She could hear the sincerity in Elon's voice, and yet, a part of her bristled at the idea of yet another setback. She had pushed so hard to get to this point, and now it felt like the universe was testing her resolve. All right, she said, exhaling slowly. I'll make it work. We'll manage the timeline internally and keep the team motivated. Thanks for letting me know. She hung up the phone and stared out the window, her mind racing. There was no turning back now. She had promised herself that she would not let failure define her, but it was becoming harder to stay positive in the face of constant setbacks. The team's morale had taken a hit when Lila had informed them about the technical issue. The delays were inevitable, and now there was the added pressure of keeping the investors happy. The tension in the room was palpable during their weekly meeting as they discussed the revised timeline. We can't afford another delay, Marcus said, his voice edged with frustration. We're already behind. If this project fails, it's not just our reputations on the line, it's the investors' money. Lila could feel the weight of his words like a physical blow. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence, each person digesting the gravity of their situation. I know it's hard, Lila said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. But we can't rush it. We need to fix the problem properly. Elon's team is already on it, and we'll have a solution in place soon. But how soon? Marcus pressed. We can't just sit around waiting. People are starting to question our ability to deliver. Lila felt the pressure mounting. The stakes had never been higher, and now, more than ever, she had to prove she could lead them through this storm. She took a deep breath before responding. I understand your frustration, Marcus, she said firmly. But we can't afford to cut corners. I won't let this project fail, just because we're desperate to meet a deadline. We'll get it done, but we'll do it the right way. As the meeting ended, Lila couldn't shake the feeling that the team was losing faith in her. She had made bold decisions in the past, but this time felt different. The road ahead wasn't just about technical fixes, it was about keeping the team together, about inspiring them to keep pushing even when things seemed impossible. That evening, as Lila was preparing to leave for the day, the door to her office creaked open. To her surprise, it was Jason. He stood there, looking more subdued than she had ever seen him. I need to talk to you, Jason said quietly, his hands clasped behind his back. Lila narrowed her eyes. She hadn't expected him to show up, let alone ask for a meeting. After everything that had happened, she wasn't sure if she was ready to hear what he had to say. All right, she said cautiously, motioning for him to sit down. What's this about? Jason hesitated, choosing his words carefully. I know I've messed up, he began, his voice filled with regret. And I don't expect you to forgive me. But I came here because I want to help. I've been talking to some of the old contacts we worked with before, people I still trust. If you're willing to give me a chance, I can make some calls and get us back on track. Lila studied him for a moment, unsure whether to believe his sudden change of heart. The trust between them had been shattered, and she wasn't sure if she could ever see him as an ally again. I don't know if I can trust you, Jason, she replied slowly. You betrayed us. You betrayed me. How do I know you're not just trying to save your own skin? Jason lowered his gaze, his voice growing softer. I deserve that. But I've had time to think. I've realized that the only way forward is to make things right. I can't undo what I did, but I can offer you the support you need now. Lila sat in silence, weighing his words. She had come this far without him, but the offer was tempting. If Jason could deliver on his promises, it might be exactly what the project needed to stay afloat. I'll think about it, she said finally. But know this, if you're lying, I'll find out. And I won't forgive you again. Jason nodded, a look of gratitude crossing his face. I understand. I just want to help. As he left, Lila sat back in her chair, conflicted. She didn't know whether to take Jason at his word or to shut him out completely. But in that moment, she realized one thing for sure, nothing was ever as simple as it seemed, and the road ahead would be filled with more difficult decisions. Have you ever had to make a decision that could change your life forever? One wrong move, and everything could fall apart. What would you do? Lila stared at her phone, the message from Jason still lingering on the screen. She'd never been one to let her emotions get in the way of making decisions, but this felt different. Jason had betrayed her, the team, and everything they had worked for. And now, here he was, offering his help as if he hadn't torn apart the trust that held them all together. But the project needed fixing, and time was running out. The investors were breathing down their necks, the clock ticking relentlessly. She couldn't afford to let personal grudges get in the way of success. Still, the risk was enormous. One wrong decision, and everything could fall apart. With a deep breath, Lila composed herself. She had faced bigger challenges before, hadn't she? This was no different. The key was to stay calm, think strategically, and not let the emotions cloud her judgment. She called Jason back. All right, she said when he answered. We'll give it a shot. But I want specifics. No vague promises. Jason's voice cracked with relief. You won't regret this, Lila. I'm putting you in touch with the right people, and we'll get the tech working like it should. She hung up, but the uncertainty lingered. Was she making the right choice? Would Jason's contacts be able to help? Or was she making a dangerous gamble? The next few days were a whirlwind. Jason delivered on his promise, reaching out to his old network, and connecting Lila with new people who were experts in the areas they needed. Slowly but surely, the project started to regain its momentum. The flaw in the system was identified and fixed, and the revised timeline seemed achievable once again. But even as the tech side of things began to fall into place, Lila couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She caught Jason's eyes lingering on her a few times during their late-night meetings, as if he was testing the waters, hoping for a chance to rebuild the trust they once shared. Every time she saw it, she turned away, focusing back on the work at hand. There was no room for personal feelings, not now. However, as the progress continued, the pressure intensified. The investors wanted results, and they wanted them now. Lila was beginning to feel the weight of their expectations, pressing down on her with every passing day. They needed her to deliver. They needed this to work. She was at the office late one evening when Elon called again. His voice was calm, but there was an edge of urgency. Lila, we've hit a snag. One of the new systems we're integrating has an incompatibility with your existing infrastructure. It's nothing we can't fix, but it's going to require a team to stay on site for the next week. I need to know if your team can handle this. Lila's heart raced. It felt like every time they made one step forward, they were pushed back too. The work she had done, the team she had rallied, they were all on the line now. "I'll have my team handle it," she said, trying to sound confident, though doubts gnawed at her. "We'll figure it out." "Good," Elon replied. "We trust you. But if there's anything you need from us, don't hesitate to ask." As she hung up, Lila was left alone with her thoughts. She wasn't just managing a project anymore, she was managing people's livelihoods, reputations, and a future that felt more fragile with every decision. The pressure was becoming unbearable. The next day, Lila was greeted with an unexpected sight as she entered the office. Marcus was waiting for her, his expression uncharacteristically serious. "I think we need to talk," he said as she approached her desk. Lila raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "About you," Marcus said bluntly, "and the choices you've been making." Her stomach dropped. She had never felt as exposed as she did now, under Marcus's piercing gaze. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, leaning forward, "this isn't just about the project anymore. It's about your leadership. You're burning yourself out, Lila. You're pushing everyone around you too hard, and you're keeping them in the dark about what's really going on. You can't handle everything by yourself. We need transparency." Lila opened her mouth to argue, but stopped herself. Marcus was right, in a way. She had been keeping her cards close to her chest, not wanting to admit to her team how much she was struggling. But the weight of the situation was becoming impossible to carry alone. She couldn't afford to crack. Not now. "I didn't want to burden anyone," Lila finally said, her voice softer than she intended. "But I guess I've been making decisions on my own without consulting anyone else." "You're right. I should have been more open with all of you." Marcus nodded, his expression softening. "Look, I know you've been under pressure. But you're not in this alone. We're a team, and we need to trust each other. Let's work together to figure this out. Just, don't shut us out, okay?" Lila felt a surge of gratitude. Maybe she hadn't completely lost the trust of her team after all. She was no longer carrying the burden by herself. "Okay," she said, finally feeling like she could breathe again. "Let's work together." As the days wore on, the atmosphere in the office shifted. The team began to communicate more openly, sharing their frustrations and triumphs. It wasn't easy, but Lila started to feel like she had a real team behind her again, people who believed in the project as much as she did. But just as things began to settle, Elon's call came again, this time with news that would change everything. "Lila," Elon said, his voice urgent. "We need to have a meeting. There's something I need to tell you about the project. It's important." Lila's heart skipped a beat. "What's going on?" "I can't explain over the phone," Elon replied. "It's better if we discuss this in person. Can you meet me tomorrow?" Lila's stomach twisted in anxiety. Was this another problem? A setback? She had no way of knowing, but she couldn't afford to be unprepared. "Okay," she said, her voice steady, despite the growing unease. "I'll be there." As the call ended, Lila's mind raced. The path ahead seemed clearer, but with every step forward, new challenges appeared. What was Elon about to tell her? Would this be the thing that finally made everything click, or would it bring everything crashing down? Have you ever been on the verge of something monumental, only to have it slip through your fingers? Every step you take feels like it could be the one to either make or break everything. Lila's nerves were on edge as she walked into the meeting room the next morning. She had barely slept, and the uncertainty of what Elon was going to reveal gnawed at her. As she sat across from him, she tried to steady her breathing, hoping to maintain the composure she had fought so hard to keep intact. Elon, always so poised, didn't waste any time. He leaned forward, his eyes locked onto hers, and began speaking in a low, serious tone. "Lila," he started, "there's been a change of plans. I've been made aware of some issues that weren't in the original scope of the project. And I need to be upfront with you, this is a situation that could jeopardize everything." Lila's heart sank. She forced herself to stay calm, her mind running through every possible scenario. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice steady, though inside, she was bracing herself for bad news. Elon paused for a moment, as if weighing his next words carefully. "The investors have pulled some of their funding. They're not happy with the direction things have taken. There's been talk of pulling out altogether unless we can prove we're back on track." Lila's stomach churned. This wasn't just a setback, it was a major blow. "How much funding are we talking about? What does this mean for the project?" "They've frozen a significant portion," Elon replied. "We need to prove that we can meet our deadlines and deliver the results we promised. Without that, we could lose everything." The weight of his words settled on her shoulders like a heavy, unshakable burden. She couldn't afford to let this project slip through her fingers, not when she had fought so hard to get this far. "What can we do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Elon leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "We need a new plan. A breakthrough. Something that will get their attention and prove that we're capable of handling this. You'll need to pull in all the resources you can, your team, the contacts you've made, and any outside help you can muster. We're running out of time." Lila nodded, trying to steady her thoughts. Her mind was racing. There was no way she could pull this off alone. She needed her team, every single one of them. But would they trust her after everything that had happened? Could they pull together for one last push? Back at the office, Lila gathered her team for an emergency meeting. The air was thick with tension as they filed into the conference room, their faces a mix of exhaustion and uncertainty. The past few days had been grueling, and now, it seemed like the stakes had grown even higher. "Listen up, everyone," Lila began, trying to project confidence despite the storm raging inside her. "We're facing some serious challenges right now. The investors have pulled a significant portion of their funding. They want results, and they want them fast. If we don't prove ourselves, this project, everything we've worked for, could be over." The room fell silent as the gravity of her words settled over them. Lila could see the worry etched on their faces, but she knew she couldn't afford to back down. Not now. "We need to double down," she continued, her voice firm. "I know this hasn't been easy, but we have one shot to turn this around. We need to fix the remaining issues, finish the integration, and deliver something that blows their expectations out of the water." Marcus spoke up first, his tone cautious. "How do you expect us to do that, Lila? The timeline's already tight, and we're dealing with a system that's practically held together by duct tape at this point. You're asking us to pull off a miracle." Lila locked eyes with him. "I'm asking you to give it everything you've got. We've come this far, and I won't let it fall apart now. I know it's tough, but I believe in all of you. You've got the skills, the drive, we can do this if we work together." There was a long pause before Jason spoke. His voice was hesitant, but there was something in his tone that hinted at the tension between him and Lila finally beginning to dissipate. "What if we bring in some external experts to help with the most difficult issues? Maybe if we have a fresh set of eyes, we'll see something we missed." Lila considered his suggestion, then nodded. "I think that's a good idea. I'll reach out to the contacts I've been working with. We need all the help we can get." She paused, looking around the room. "We're in this together, no matter what. Let's put everything we've got into this. We can make it work." There was a moment of silence, and then, slowly, the team began to nod in agreement. It wasn't going to be easy, but they were all in this together. Over the next few days, the team worked tirelessly, each member pushing themselves to the limit. Lila coordinated with the outside experts, bringing in specialists who could identify the root of the issues and come up with solutions faster than the internal team alone could manage. The hours blurred together as they worked around the clock, the pressure building with each passing minute. But as the work continued, cracks began to show. The strain was starting to take its toll on everyone. Marcus and Lila had frequent disagreements over the direction of the project, their stress manifesting in sharp words and frustration. Jason seemed distracted, his earlier eagerness to contribute giving way to moments of doubt and hesitation. Lila could feel the strain in the air, and it made her wonder, was the team still as unified as they had been in the beginning? Or was this pressure, this relentless march toward an uncertain future, driving them apart? By the end of the week, they had made significant progress. The remaining bugs in the system were fixed, the integration was nearing completion, and the prototype was functioning more smoothly than ever before. But Lila knew that wasn't enough. She needed something more, something that would ensure the investors wouldn't pull out for good. She called an impromptu meeting, her heart racing as she looked around the room at her team. This was it. They had one last chance to prove they could do this. Everyone, she began, trying to steady her voice, we're in the home stretch. But we need to go beyond just fixing the problems, we need to give them something groundbreaking. Something they can't ignore. Marcus raised an eyebrow. What are you suggesting? Lila took a deep breath. I'm suggesting we take a risk. A big one. We've got one shot at this, and I say we go all in. Her heart pounded as she laid out her plan. Would her team agree? Or would they back away from the precipice she was pushing them toward? Everything you've fought for, everything you've worked towards, comes down to this moment. The clock is ticking, and the world is watching. Will you rise, or will you fall? The weight of the final decision hung heavy in the room as Lila watched her team. Every face seemed to carry the same doubt, the same sense of uncertainty, but also something else, hope. It wasn't easy, but they had pushed through so much already. This, Lila thought, was their last shot at redemption. She could feel the eyes of her team on her, waiting for a sign, a nudge, to let them know what to do. She took a deep breath and leaned forward, her resolve as strong as steel. Here's the plan. We release a version of the prototype that includes a feature no one's seen before, something groundbreaking, something that will make everyone sit up and take notice. Jason frowned. But that's risky, Lila. We're not even sure it'll work in the field. We're barely holding everything together as it is. Lila held his gaze. I know. But if we keep playing it safe, we'll never get the investors to believe in us again. We've come this far, why stop now? There was a long silence as the team members exchanged glances. It was as if they were all waiting for one person to speak up, to either rally behind her or voice their doubts. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice rough but determined. I'm with you, Lila. We've got one shot. If we don't take it, we'll regret it forever. Lila nodded, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. She knew this was the right choice. They had come too far to back down now. With their collective skills, and the edge she was offering them with this new feature, they could pull it off. She wasn't going to let the weight of failure hold them back. The team immediately sprang into action. The hours blurred again as they worked tirelessly, pushing their limits, perfecting every last detail. The feature was integrated into the prototype, and the tests came back promising. It was the risk they had to take, and it looked like it was going to pay off. As the sun began to set on the last day before the presentation, Lila's heart raced. She had gone through every scenario in her head, but the truth was, she wasn't entirely sure if this gamble would work. She was running on faith in herself, in her team, and in the idea they had all fought so hard to bring to life. The morning of the presentation arrived, and the team gathered in the sleek conference room, waiting for the investors to arrive. Lila stood at the front, her hands shaking slightly as she reviewed the presentation one last time. She was aware of the tension in the room, the investors, the eyes of the industry, and all the weight of her own choices pressing down on her. The doors opened, and the investors walked in, each face as unreadable as ever. Lila had faced them before, but this time felt different. This time everything was on the line. She swallowed her nerves, adjusted her blazer, and began her pitch. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today. What you're about to see is the culmination of months of hard work, countless hours of dedication, and a belief in innovation that I know we all share. I'm confident that what you're about to see will exceed your expectations. She paused, watching as they shifted in their seats, waiting for the reveal. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, but she held steady. This was the moment they had all worked for. With a single command, the prototype came to life on the screen. The new feature, an adaptive AI that predicted real-time adjustments and streamlined the system's efficiency, was a game-changer. Lila watched the investors' reactions closely, their eyes widening, some leaning forward in their seats. The tension in the room shifted. What was once skepticism began to turn into intrigue. Lila spoke again, her voice now more confident. What you're seeing here is a leap ahead of what anyone else in this industry is capable of. We believe this will not only meet your expectations, but exceed them, setting a new standard in the field. She showed them the data, the increased efficiency, the potential for scalability, and most importantly, the proof that their team could deliver on time, under pressure, and with innovation at the core. The room was silent for a moment, and then the questions began to come fast and sharp. The investors grilled Lila and her team on the specifics of the feature, the timeline, and the implementation. But each answer Lila gave was met with a nod of approval. By the time the presentation was over, the investors were no longer the detached figures they had been. They were leaning in, discussing the future with Lila, not as a question, but as a possibility. Finally, one of the lead investors stood up, a rare smile breaking through his normally stern demeanor. "I have to admit," he said, "I didn't think you had it in you. But this is impressive. We're willing to invest further. Let's talk numbers." Lila's heart nearly leaped out of her chest. She exchanged a quick, relieved glance with her team. They had done it. They had succeeded. Against all odds, they had turned everything around. As Lila left the conference room, the weight of the past weeks lifted off her shoulders. She had done it. The team had done it. And now, with renewed funding and a solid plan in place, they could move forward. But as she looked out the window at the city skyline, Lila knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The journey ahead would be filled with more challenges, more risks to take, and more decisions to make. But with the support of her team, the trust they had built, and the lessons they had learned, she felt ready. Whatever comes next, she thought, we'll face it together. We've already beaten the odds once. We can do it again. And with that, Lila stepped into the future, knowing that no matter what, she had proved something far greater than the success of a project. She had proven to herself, and to the world, that even in the face of overwhelming obstacles, anything was possible. In the end, it's not about the triumphs or failures. It's about the courage to keep pushing forward, no matter the odds.